collapse of mental acuity in the President of the United States, the current president. This weekend, the President of the United States endorsed a social media post that says, "There is no Joe Biden, executed in 2020, Biden clones, doubles, and robotic engineered, soulless, mindless entities are what you see." Needless to say, Donald Trump is the only president in history who can publicly embrace and accept and believe such insanity without immediately provoking a rush of questions by the White House press corps and news organizations around the world about the sanity of the American president, which means that the insanity of the current American president is now officially taken for granted in the news media. No huge banners on the cable news network that recently devoted itself to the issue of presidential mental acuity. That network did not dare devote itself to the mental acuity of Donald Trump. That network decided that the mental acuity of Joe Biden last year is a more important story now. No one at that network suggested that Joe Biden was ever incapable of doing the job of president. Their critique of Joe Biden is that he was incapable of delivering a sharp and polished television debate performance, which would have been true of every single president prior to John Fitzgerald Kennedy. What was lost in the relentless coverage of the Biden-Trump presidential debate was that after Joe Biden paused so long that he seemed frozen, that for the rest of that debate, no one appeared to pay attention to the rest of that debate, and the rest of that debate, Joe Biden actually made perfect sense. And Donald Trump did not. Donald Trump did not tell one true thing during that debate, but that doesn't seem to matter to the focus on Joe Biden in that debate, and I can understand that. Joe Biden revealed in that debate that he was 4 years older than the last time he ran for president, that he was slower, much slower, and he was way more than 4 times smarter and more capable than Donald Trump ever was. That was also apparent in that debate. And we all know, as do the pushers of every anti-Biden campaign theory out there, that it would be impossible for Joe Biden, on his worst day, to tweet that Donald Trump was executed in 2020 and that Trump clones, gubbles, and robotic engineered soulless, mindless entities are what you see when you look at Donald Trump today. What we do know is that we could surely engineer a robotic, soulless, mindless entity to be smarter than Donald Trump. The overwhelming majority of the American news media has absolutely no problem now with Donald Trump saying there is no Joe Biden executed in 2020. Donald Trump didn't actually write those words himself, but he found those words in his poison social media feed, and he decided to fully endorse and embrace those words. The New York Times remains one of the news organizations that finds that kind of behavior in the president strange, though not worthy of big front-page headlines. And so the New York Times are in a story titled, "Trump Amplifies Another Outlandish Conspiracy Theory, Biden is a Robotic Clone." And here is the most important line in that story. The White House did not respond to requests for comment on the post about Mr. Biden. That, of course, would be impossible for any other White House if any other president said that a previous living president is a robotic clone. That White House would not be able to simply refuse to comment. But that is how fully Donald Trump has crushed political reporting and political coverage in this country. And because he has crushed it, he can, in publicity terms anyway, get away with anything. And he knows that Donald Trump is behaving like someone who believes he can get away with anything. Listen to a bit of Joe Biden's last interview as President of the United States in the last week of his presidency. We'll play that for you now. We leave it to you to decide if you're seeing a Biden clone, a double, or a robotic engineered soulless, mindless entity. And while you're at it, you can decide if that entity is smarter than Donald Trump, a better president than Donald Trump, and would be a better president than Donald Trump today. I asked Joe Biden why he decided to take the risk to become the first president in history to visit a war zone that was not controlled by U.S. troops when he visited Ukraine. I didn't think that Putin would dare take out an American president. I was worried, concerned about a radical element within Ukraine that was under their control or working with the Russians and my treasure. That's why we went so way out of our way to get the best people to travel that 10-hour ride that traded. And, but I thought it was important that we demonstrate to the rest of the European leaders, stand out in that. We can stand up and do this. We could prevent this from happening. My concern was if we didn't go, we didn't show up, then who leads? What happens? I didn't think it, by the way. I knew it was, I've got to go to the Ukraine, but I think it was important that we treat Ukraine like a independent country, want us to talk to them, I wanted them to know that we were with them. And it was the best way to do that. That is a description of presidential decision-making. That is the kind of presidential decision-making that this country got used to for centuries under thoughtful presidents, regardless of party affiliation. Whatever you're wondering about how well Joe Biden did his job as president, whenever you wonder about that separate and apart from his job as a presidential candidate, which he did not do well, you can always find that last interview of his that he did as president on YouTube, where, among other things, we reviewed the major presidential decisions that he had to make. You can check that video whenever you're wondering how Joe Biden was actually doing the job as president and what his mental acuity was like in the last week of his presidency. One of Joe Biden's responses in that interview, you will find the kind of careful thoughtfulness you have a right to expect in a president of the United States, and is the kind of thinking that Donald Trump has not been capable of for one day of his life. We went from the man you just saw on your screen to a man who claims that Joe Biden was executed in 2020. Now, if you want to rush to Donald Trump's defense and tell us that that was a joke, then please explain why, as the Mayor Times reports, the White House did not respond to requests for comment on the post about Mr. Biden. If you want to rush to Donald Trump's defense, you are going to